Addiction is best understood as a pattern that delivers comfort now while quietly exacting a price later, and that continues even as the costs mount. It can show up in any behavior a person enjoys, turns to for relief, and then finds hard to stop despite harm. That might involve substances like alcohol, nicotine, opioids, stimulants, or cannabis, but it can just as easily live in habits such as gambling, scrolling, shopping, sex, work, extreme exercise, eating, or online relationships. The common thread isn't the object. It's the felt sense of immediate soothing, followed by long-term consequences, and the stubborn pull to return. There are familiar stories about why this happens. One medical narrative calls addiction a primary disorder of the brain, driven largely by inherited factors. A moral narrative frames it as a matter of will and choice. The first account is closer to compassion than the second, but neither fully captures what people live. Genes can tilt the field, and the brain is certainly involved, yet the deeper origins are relational and experiential. Brains develop inside lives, and lives begin inside relationships. When early experience burdens rather than buffers a child, the nervous system adapts for survival in ways that later make relief feel urgent and letting go feel impossible. From the first days of life, a human being depends on more than food and warmth. Two psychological needs steer development alongside the physical ones. The first is attachment, the bond that keeps an infant close to a devoted adult and, later, keeps children and caregivers attuned to one another. Attachment is not a luxury. Mammals and even birds are wired to seek proximity because care is the vehicle of survival. Our own bodies reflect this design. The brain's endogenous opioids, the endorphins, are chemistry for comfort and closeness. When these systems are disrupted early, connection becomes harder to feel. In laboratory animals with silenced endorphin receptors, the instinct to cry out for the mother can fade. Translate that to human life, and you can glimpse why an opioid might feel to some like a soft embrace. It imitates the signal for safety their bodies learned to live without. The second need is authenticity. The ability to stay connected to one's own inner signals and act in alignment with them. Think of authenticity as the working relationship with your gut feelings. Knowing what you feel, noticing what your body says, and allowing that information to guide you. Across long stretches of human history, this attunement to instinct was not optional. Before cities and screens, survival depended on reading the world moment by moment. Trusting your gut was a life-preserving skill, not a self-help slogan. Both attachment and authenticity protect life, yet in many families they collide. Imagine a toddler who protests when denied a treat before dinner. The child's flash of anger is an honest signal, not a moral failing. But if the adults are frightened by anger, perhaps because they grew up amid rages or were shamed for their own feelings, they may pull away, scold, or shut the child down. To the youngster, the message does not land as anger should be managed. It lands as anger makes me unlovable. Faced with the awful threat of losing closeness, a child will trade authenticity for attachment every time. That bargain is rational in the moment. It keeps the bond intact. Over years, though, the repeated choice to mute feelings so that love remains available can estrange a person from their own inner life. The compass gets fuzzy. The body still speaks, but the mind learns not to listen. This early compromise echoes in subtle ways. A teenager feels unease around a peer group, but ignores it to belong. An adult senses exhaustion, but powers through to earn approval. Gradually the question, "What do I feel?" goes quiet, replaced by, "What keeps me connected?" The cost of that silence accumulates. Anxiety and numbness creep in. The present becomes harder to inhabit. A person may start to look outward for a reliable switch that can turn distress down and warmth up. Substances and compulsive behaviors offer exactly that. They are fast, predictable, and available. For a brief stretch, they manufacture the state the nervous system has been missing: ease, focus, relief, a sense of being held. Seen this way, addiction is not the core problem. It is a clever, temporary solution to unbearable inner states. It works, and then it does damage. The smoking calms and constricts. The drink loosens and erodes. The binge distracts and depletes. The cycle continues because the original need remains unmet. The need to feel safe, connected, and true to oneself without external props. To understand how this need got buried, it helps to look closely at trauma. The word is often used for events: assaults, losses, neglect, terrifying fights, a parent's depression, a caregiver's intoxication, the unpredictable chaos of a home. Those are indeed traumatic. But trauma itself is not the event. Trauma is the imprint the event leaves on the nervous system. It is the adaptations a young mind and body make to endure what was too much, too soon, or too often, in the absence of adequate support. Trauma is the disconnection from emotion, the split from the body, the difficulty staying present, the belief that the world is unsafe and the self is unworthy, and the defensive posture toward others that all grow out of those early compromises. These patterns are brilliant short-term strategies. They keep a child afloat. As adulthood unfolds, they become the invisible architecture of suffering. If addiction is a method of coping with that architecture, then change cannot be reduced to lectures on willpower or threats of punishment. The question shifts from why the addiction to why the pain. Follow that question back, and you find the rift between the need for attachment and the need for authenticity, and the ways in which a person learned, again and again, that disappearing from themselves was the toll for staying close. Healing begins where that bargain is examined and gently reversed. Healing asks for more than stopping a behavior. It asks for the slow return of self. When people speak of recovery, the word quietly contains the task. To recover is to find again. What is found is not a perfect life, but a living connection to body, feelings, values, and relationships that can hold discomfort without fleeing. The opposite of addiction is not simply abstinence. It is belonging to one's own experience and to a community where difficult states are met with care rather than exile. Reconnection begins in the body, because the body never stopped telling the truth, even when the mind learned to turn away. Gentle practices that bring attention to breath, posture, tension, and sensation can reopen the pathways that went numb for good reasons. This is not about performing calm. It is about learning to notice the flicker of anxiety before it becomes a fire, the drop of sadness before it hardens into despair, the spark of anger before it explodes or implodes. When sensation becomes tolerable again, choice returns. A person can pause. In that pause, urges lose their absolute power. Safe relationships are the other cradle of repair. No one learned to disconnect alone. Disconnection was learned in the space between people. It is most reliably undone there, whether in a therapeutic alliance, a peer group, a circle of trusted friends, or a family willing to grow. The experience of being seen without being shamed rewrites the expectations that live in the nervous system. The old rule said, feelings threaten love. The new repeated experience says, feelings are welcome here. Over time, the body believes the new rule. The distance between an inner state and the act of reaching for relief begins to widen. Shame is often the gatekeeper that guards the old bargain. It insists that the past must stay hidden, that need is weakness, that struggle is proof of defect. But shame is not a moral compass. It is a scar. It formed to keep a child safe by preventing the exposure that once invited hurt. Meeting shame with curiosity loosens its grip. What was the danger this feeling tried to prevent? What did it protect me from back then? These questions do not excuse harm. They explain it, and explained behavior becomes changeable behavior. As reconnection deepens, grief arrives. There is grief for what happened and for what did not happen, for the years spent far from oneself, for the relationships warped by survival strategies. Grief is not a detour, it is part of the road. When tears are allowed, the body no longer needs to outsource relief to a substance or a compulsion quite so urgently. Sorrow metabolized becomes space, and in that space new choices can breathe. Relapse, when it occurs, is not proof that nothing works. It is information. Something in the inner or outer environment became too much, too fast, or too lonely. Instead of returning to punishment, which reenacts the old wound, the task is to map what happened. What feeling was present? What support was missing? What boundary was crossed? What need was ignored? The answers become design notes for the next stage of healing, not accusations. Accountability grows stronger when it is paired with compassion. Meaning and purpose also matter. The nervous system calms when life points beyond survival. Creativity, service, learning, nature, play, faith, craft, and community all provide places where energy can flow without self-erasure. When a person has reasons to wake up that do not depend on numbing pain, the pull of old solutions weakens. Purpose is not a grand mission statement. It can be as simple as tending a garden, mentoring a younger person, repairing a friendship, or building a skill. The body recognizes sincerity. It settles. None of this happens in a vacuum. Environments either support or sabotage healing. Punitive responses to addiction amplify fear and isolation, the very states that drive the cycle. Compassionate care, housing that feels safe, work that respects dignity, and healthcare that addresses trauma directly all make personal change more possible. A culture that treats distress as a moral failure will keep creating the conditions for compulsive relief. A culture that treats distress as a signal will invest in the relationships and resources that diffuse it. Self-kindness is not indulgence, it is strategy. The nervous system learns through repetition. Each time an urge is met with acknowledgement rather than contempt, the brain records the new pattern. Each time a boundary is honored, the inner child, who once traded authenticity for attachment, learns that closeness can coexist with truth. Each time, rest is permitted without guilt. Exhaustion stops masquerading as weakness. These are small moves, yet their compound interest is enormous. For anyone listening and wondering how to start, begin where you are. Name one feeling without judging it. Notice one sensation without trying to change it. Tell one trustworthy person one true thing. Spend a few quiet minutes each day scanning your body, asking, what am I ignoring? And what do I need? If the answers are fuzzy at first, that is fine. Clarity is a muscle. Seek professional help if trauma memories, panic, or despair feel overwhelming. Therapy that honors the body, approaches that integrate mindfulness and movement, and groups where others speak openly about their paths can all offer scaffolding while you rebuild your own. Expect progress to move in waves. There will be days when presence feels easy and days when it feels impossible. The measure is not perfection. It is the shrinking distance between a trigger and a caring response, between a craving and a wise choice, between an old story and a new possibility. Keep noticing the exceptions to your suffering, the moments that already contradict the belief that you are broken. A laugh you did not force, a meal you tasted, a boundary you kept, a night you slept. These are not small. They are signs that the system is recalibrating. As the work continues, the original conflict between attachment and authenticity transforms. You do not have to choose. You can be connected to others without abandoning yourself, and you can be true to yourself without losing love. This is the birthright that early experiences obscured but did not erase. When authenticity and attachment hold hands, relief no longer needs to be borrowed from the future. Comfort is earned in the present through contact, courage, and care. In time, the old solutions lose their shine because the needs they once served are met more directly. Warmth comes from people who stay. Focus comes from a nervous system that is learning to regulate. Freedom comes from speaking the truth kindly and hearing it welcomed. The behavior that once defined you becomes a chapter, not the whole book. You look back with tenderness for the person who did whatever they had to do to get through and forward with steadier eyes. The life that felt like someone else's begins to feel like yours again. That is recovery in its plainest form. Not a performance, not a sentence, but the return of self to self, held by relationships that make staying present possible.